The translator AI screamed, not with words, but with the sound of cooling fans spinning so fast they began to melt. Director Sornka watched through her 7 compound eyes as the machine's display flickered with nonsense before going dark forever. That makes 847, she said quietly. Her assistant, a young Kethrani named Boral, made a note on his datapad. Should I order another unit, Director? Sornka did not answer. She had spent 200 years of her 400-year lifespan trying to decode the tablets. 200 years of failure. 200 years of watching the brightest minds in the galaxy break themselves against the same wall. The archive of silence floated in orbit around a dead star. It was the size of a small moon, built 40,000 years ago to house the greatest mystery in galactic history. 10,000 tablets left behind by the Velnari, a species that had simply vanished at the height of their power. No war, no disease, no disaster. They were there one day and gone the next. Every advanced civilization had tried to decode the tablets. The Morvex had sent their greatest logical minds. The Kethrani had thrown entire fleets of computing power at the problem. The Cylon had meditated on single symbols for centuries. All had failed. The symbols on the tablets seemed to move when you looked away. They formed patterns that made mathematical sense for exactly 3 steps before collapsing into paradox. 3 xenolinguists had gone mad trying to understand them. Their final words were always the same. It's so simple. Why can't you see? She already knew what it would say. Director, the Consortium Council wishes to remind you that funding review is in 60 cycles. She closed all 7 of her eyes and took a breath. The Council had been threatening to shut down the archive for decades. Every year, she promised results. Every year, she delivered nothing. Director? Boral's voice was hesitant. There's one more thing. The humans have arrived. Sornka made a sound that her species used to express disgust. Humans, the newest members of the Galactic Consortium. A primitive species from a small planet who had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. The Council had granted them archive access as a diplomatic gesture. Nothing more. Send them away, she said. I cannot, Director. The access was approved at the highest levels. They have sent a xenolinguist. A human xenolinguist. Sornka laughed bitterly. What will they do? Throw rocks at the tablets. The human arrived 2 hours later. He was smaller than Sornka expected, with soft skin and only 2 eyes. He carried a worn bag over one shoulder and held a paper notebook in his hands. Paper, like an animal. Director Sornka. The human's voice was warm and friendly. I'm Denny Vep. Thank you for having me. Sornka studied him. You are the xenolinguist? Yes, ma'am. Well, I used to be a children's librarian back on Earth. Then I got interested in alien languages. He smiled. Funny how life works out. A children's librarian. The Council had sent her a children's librarian. Mr. Webb, she said carefully, you understand that the greatest minds in the galaxy have failed to decode these tablets. Oh yes. I read all the reports on the trip here. Fascinating stuff. He looked around the archives entrance hall with wide eyes. This place is amazing. Can I see one? Sornka decided to end this quickly. She would give a human access to Tablet 001. Let him stare at it for a few hours, and then send him home with a nice letter for his government. Follow me. The tablet chamber was kept in complete darkness, except for the soft glow of the tablets themselves. 10,000 crystalline surfaces lined the walls, each one covered in symbols that shifted and danced in the corner of vision. Sornka led Danny to Tablet 001 and activated the viewing field. You may observe, she said. Do not touch. Do not speak to it. Do not attempt to interface with any equipment. I will return in 3 hours. She left him there, alone with the mystery that had consumed her entire adult life. From her office, Sornka watched through the security feeds. The human sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at the tablet. He did not move. He did not blink. For 3 hours, he simply looked. Sornka began to feel something she had not felt in decades. Respect. The human was taking this seriously. Then, in the 187th minute, Danny Webb did something no one had ever done in the archive of silence that he laughed. The sound echoed through the ancient halls. Security alarms triggered. Containment fields activated. 17 different protocols identified the laugh as a potential sign of mental contamination. Thus Sornka ran. She found Danny still sitting on the floor, tears streaming down his face, his whole body shaking with laughter. Mr. Webb. She grabbed his shoulder. Mr. Webb, what happened? What did you see? Danny looked up at her, his eyes bright with joy. It's a knock-knock joke, he said. Director, the tablet is a knock-knock joke. Sornka felt the world tilt beneath her feet. That's impossible. Danny wiped his eyes and smiled the biggest smile she had ever seen on any species. I know, but it's really, really funny. 12 weapons pointed at Danny Webb's head. The security team had arrived in seconds, their armor gleaming in the soft light of the tablets. The team leader, a massive Kethrani with scales like black metal, spoke in a voice that allowed no argument. Human, step away from the artifact. Hands visible. Danny raised his hands slowly, still grinning. I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I just thought it was funny. Laughing in the archive is classified as a contamination event, the team leader said. The last 3 researchers who claimed understanding exhibited similar behavior before complete mental breakdown. Sornka stepped between them. Lower your weapons. I will handle this. The team hesitated, then obeyed. Sornka turned all 7 of her eyes toward Danny. Explain. Now. Danny pointed at the tablet. May I show you? You may speak. Do not touch anything. Danny nodded and moved closer to the glowing symbols. His finger traced the air above them, never making contact. See these 3 symbols here? Your translation AIs read them as mathematical operators. But look at the shape. They're not operators. They're faces. This one is surprised. This one is confused. And this one is laughing. Sornka landed closer. For 200 years, she had seen those symbols as numbers. Now, suddenly, she could see the expressions Danny described. Continue. The whole tablet is structured like a joke. Setup, 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 and then the punchline. Danny pointed to the final row of symbols. This part drove your AIs crazy because it doesn't make logical sense. But it's not supposed to make sense. That's what makes it funny. What does it say? Danny cleared his throat. Okay, so the Velnari version is better, but roughly translated, what has 4 wings, no eyes, and tastes like starlight? Sornka waited. I do not know. Neither does anyone else. That's the joke. Danny laughed again, softer this time. It's absurd. It's supposed to be absurd. Your AIs kept trying to find a logical answer, but the whole point is that there isn't one. The security team exchanged glances. This was not the behavior of a contaminated mind. This was something else entirely. Show me another, Sornka said. Danny moved to tablet 002. He studied it for only a few minutes before his face softened into a gentle smile. This one's a bedtime story. There's a small creature, something like a caterpillar, who looks up at the sky and sees a star. The creature wants to be friends with the star, but everyone tells it that stars are too far away, too hot, too different. But the creature doesn't give up. Every night, it waves at the star. And one night, the star winks back. Sornka felt something strange at her chest. A tightness she could not explain. That is the entire story. That's the entire story. The end. But what happens next? Does the creature reach the star? Danny shook his head. It doesn't matter. The story isn't about reaching the star. It's about believing that stars can be friends. Over the next 6 hours, Danny decoded tablet after tablet. Each one was simpler than any scientist had imagined. Tablet 003 was a recipe. Something sweet, meant for celebrations. Tablet 004 was a list of funny sounds that made babies laugh. Tablet 005 was a game involving colors and counting. Word spread through the archive. Other staff members gathered at the edges of the chamber, watching in silence as the human worked. Some wept. Others stood frozen, unable to process what they were witnessing. The Consortium Council was notified. Within hours, ambassadors from a dozen species demanded verification. The Kethrani ambassador, a towering figure named Lord Thessin, arrived personally. This is a fabrication, he declared. The human is inventing these translations to gain prestige for his primitive species. Sornka stood her ground. The translations have internal consistency. They reference each other, build on shared concepts. No fabrication could achieve this level of coherence. Then the human is being manipulated. The tablets are feeding him false information. Danny spoke up from across the chamber. Lord Thessan, with respect, why would the Velnari create 10,000 tablets of false information? What would be the point? To deceive us, to weaken us. With knock-knock jokes, Danny smiled gently. With bedtime stories about caterpillars who want to be friends with stars. Lord Thessan had no answer. The Cylon delegation arrived next. They were an ancient species, nearly as old as the Velnari themselves. Their representative, a being of flowing silver light named Whisper of Dawn, approached Tablet 002 and listened as Danny read the translation. When he finished, Whisper of Dawn made a sound no Cylon had made in 10,000 years. She wept. We had forgotten, she said through her tears. We had forgotten what it felt like to hope for impossible things. Danny reached Tablet 500 as the station's lights dimmed for night cycle. He had been working for 18 hours straight, but his energy had not faded. Each tablet filled him with new wonder. Then he stopped. His smile disappeared. Sornka noticed immediately. What is wrong? Danny looked at her with eyes that held something heavy. Director, I need to ask you something. How exactly did the Velnari die? Sornka felt cold. They vanished. No one knows how or why. Danny looked back at the tablets. I think I'm starting to understand. And I think the answer is in tablet 10,000. That tablet is sealed. 2 researchers died attempting to access it. Danny nodded slowly. I know, but I think I know why they died. And I think I know how to survive it. The Archive of Silence had never felt so loud. Nobody in the archive slept that night. Researchers who had spent decades on single tablets now watched Danny Webb work through hundreds. His paper notebook filled with translations that seemed too simple to be real. Sornka sat beside him, her 7 eyes never blinking. Tell me about the pattern you found. Danny flipped through his notes. The tablets aren't random. They're organized by age group. Look here, tablets 1 through 500 are for very young children. Simple jokes, basic stories, songs about colors and shapes. And after 500, the stories grow up with the reader. Tablets 500 through 3000 are for older children. Adventure stories. Tales about heroes who win through cleverness instead of strength. Moral lessons hidden inside exciting plots. Danny paused on one entry. There's one about a young Velnari who lies to her parents. The story doesn't punish her directly. Instead, it shows how the lie grows bigger and bigger until it becomes impossible to carry. Sornka recognized the technique. Teaching through consequence rather than command. Exactly. The Velnari didn't tell their children what to think. They gave them stories that helped them figure it out themselves. For the next several hours, Danny explained the remaining sections. Tablets 3000 through 7000 were for adolescents, dealing with first love, finding purpose, and learning to cope with loss. There was an entire series about a young Velnari who loses his best friend and has to learn that grief is not a problem to be solved, but a weight to be carried. Tablets 7000 through 9999 were for young adults. Philosophy disguised as fiction. Ethical dilemmas presented as puzzles with no clear answers. They weren't teaching facts, Danny said. They were teaching feelings. How to feel them, how to understand them, how to use them wisely. A Morvex scientist named Logic Prime had been listening from the doorway. His species had evolved beyond emotion millions of years ago. They considered feelings to be a primitive hindrance to rational thought. This cannot be correct, Logic Prime said. The Velnari were the most advanced species in galactic history. They would not waste resources encoding emotional content. Danny looked at him kindly. What if emotion isn't a waste? What if it's the whole point? The point of what? Of everything. Logic Prime made a sound of dismissal and walked away. But Danny noticed that he did not go far. He lingered in the corridor, listening to Whisper of Dawn. The Cylon representative had not left Danny's side since hearing the bedtime story. Her silver form flickered with colors that Danny had learned to read as deep thought. The Velnari were older than my people, she said. We always assumed they left the tablets as a record of their achievements. Technology, science, power. Maybe they did, Danny said. Maybe this is what they achieved. Stories for children. The ability to raise children who understand love, loss, hope, and wonder. The ability to pass wisdom from one generation to the next without forcing it. Danny gestured at the thousands of glowing tablets. Every empire in the galaxy builds weapons and ships. But how many build this? The question hung in the air. Boral, Soren Ka's young assistant, approached with a datapad. Director, the council is demanding a full report. They want to know if there is any useful technology hidden in the translations. Soren Ka looked at Danny. Is there? Danny thought carefully before answering. There's a tablet about a builder who creates the perfect machine. It can do anything, build anything, solve any problem. But the builder becomes so focused on improving the machine that he forgets to eat, to sleep, to talk to his family. In the end, he has the most powerful tool in the universe, but no one to share it with. That is not technology, Boral said. No, it's something more important. It's a warning. The night stretched on. More species sent observers. The archive filled with beings who had spent their lives searching for power in these tablets, and were now learning that power was never the point. As dawn approached in the station's artificial day cycle, Danny reached the empty space where tablet 10,000 should have been. It was kept separately in a containment chamber at the archive's heart. The final tablet, Soren Ka said. It killed 2 researchers who attempted to access it. Their bodies showed no physical damage. Their hearts simply stopped. What were they feeling when they approached it? Danny asked. Fear. Caution. The appropriate response is to danger. Danny nodded slowly. That's why they died. I do not understand. Danny looked at the 9,999 tablets he had spent the last day reading. All of them taught the same thing in different ways. Wonder is not weakness. Love is not foolishness. Hope is not naive. The Velnari spent their children's entire lives preparing them to approach that final tablet, Danny said. Every joke, every story, every lesson was building toward one moment. The moment when they would stand before the greatest mystery their species had to offer and feel not fear, but curiosity. Not caution, but wonder. You believe the tablet is testing emotional state. I believe the tablet was designed for children who had been raised by these stories. Children who had learned that the universe is not something to conquer, but something to embrace. Danny took a deep breath. Your researchers approached it like scientists, like adults, like beings who had forgotten how to feel amazed. Sormka understod. And you have not forgotten. Danny smiled. I was a children's librarian. Amazing things are my whole job. He turned toward the containment chamber. I'm ready. The containment chamber sat at the heart of the archive, behind 17 layers of security that had not been opened in 3,000 years. Soren Ka entered the access codes with trembling hands while Danny waited beside her. You do not have to do this, she said. The council will accept partial translations. The council wants weapon blueprints hidden in bedtime stories. They're not going to find them. Danny watched the massive doors begin to open. But I need to know how the story ends. The chamber beyond was dark. Not ordinary darkness, but something deeper. Something that felt like it was watching back. At the center of the room, tablet 10,000 floated in a containment field. It was larger than the others, nearly the size of Danny himself. Its surface was darker, almost black, and the symbols carved into it seemed to pulse with a slow rhythm like a heartbeat. Danny felt the hum before he heard it. A low frequency that vibrated in his chest and made his teeth ache. He understood now why the previous researchers had died. The tablet was reading him, measuring the chemicals in his blood, the rhythm of his heart, the electrical patterns in his brain. Fear would kill him. Aggression would kill him. Even cold scientific detachment would kill him. That he thought about the bedtime story. The small creature who wanted to be friends with a star, he thought about all the jokes, the riddles, the silly sounds meant to make babies laugh. He thought about his daughter back on Earth, and how he used to read to her every night before bed. Danny Webb approached tablet 10,000 the same way he would approach a child's picture book, with wonder. The humming stopped. The darkness lifted, and the symbols on the tablet began to glow with warm golden light. Danny touched the surface. Images flooded his mind. Not words, but feelings. Not data, but understanding. He saw the Velnari at the height of their power. A species that had conquered death, unlocked the secrets of the universe, and bent reality to their will. They had everything any civilization could want, and they were miserable. Their children no longer laughed. Their artists no longer created. Their scientists discovered new truths, but felt nothing when they did. They had become so advanced that they had forgotten what it felt like to be beginners. Danny saw their leaders gather in a great chamber, much like this one. They asked themselves a question that no other species had ever thought to ask. What is the point of immortality if you have forgotten how to live? The answer came not from their greatest minds, but from their children. The youngest Velnari, not yet touched by the curse of infinite knowledge, still played games, still told jokes, still looked up at the stars and felt wonder. The adults realized their mistake. They had spent millions of years becoming powerful, but they had lost something precious along the way. They had lost the ability to feel small.s. Oh, they made a choice. They gathered everything they knew about raising children who could feel wonder. Every joke, every story, every game that had ever made a young Velnari smile. They carved them into tablets that would last forever. Then they left, not death, not extinction, transcendence. They moved beyond the physical universe into something else, something that Danny could not quite understand. But he felt their joy as they went. For the first time in millions of years, they felt like children again. They left the tablets behind as a gift. A warning, a hope. The final message was simple. We achieved everything. Power, knowledge, immortality. None of it mattered. The only thing worth keeping was this: the ability to laugh at a joke, to cry at a sad story, to look at the sky and feel amazed. We leave these tablets hoping that someone will understand, that someone will remember what we forgot, that someone will read our children's stories to their children, and in doing so, keep alive the only thing that ever truly mattered. Danny came back to himself slowly. He was sitting on the floor of the containment chamber, tears streaming down his face. The tablet had gone dark. Its message delivered. Sornka stood in the doorway, all 7 of her eyes wide with fear. "You survived," she whispered. "They didn't die," Danny said. "The Velnari didn't die. They left. They went somewhere beautiful. But they wanted us to learn from their mistake." "What mistake?" Danny looked at her, and in that moment, he seemed much older than his 28 years. They forgot how to feel. They became so focused on progress that they stopped enjoying the journey. They built an empire that could create anything except happiness. He stood slowly, his legs shaking. They spent their final years building these tablets because it was the only thing they could give us that actually mattered. Sornka said nothing for a long time. "The council will not accept this," she finally said. "They want power. They want weapons. They want the secrets of immortality. The secret of immortality is right here." Danny gestured at the tablet behind him. "Don't forget how to be amazed. Don't forget how to love. Don't forget how to tell stories that make children smile." He paused. "That's it. That's the whole secret." Sornka felt something crack inside her. 200 years of searching for power, and the answer had been here all along. "What do we do now?" Danny smiled, though it was tired and sad. "Now we tell everyone, and we hope they listen." The Consortium Council Chamber could hold representatives from 500 species. Today it was completely full. Beings of every shape, size, and origin had gathered to hear what the human had discovered in the Archive of Silence. Danny Webb stood at the center of the chamber, feeling very small. His paper notebook was clutched in his hands like a shield. Lord Thessan of the Kethrani spoke first. His voice echoed like thunder. "You claim to have decoded all 10,000 tablets. Present your findings." Danny took a deep breath. The Velnari left behind a collection of children's stories, jokes, games, and moral lessons. They were designed to teach young Velnari how to feel wonder, empathy, and joy. Silence, then murmuring, then laughter from some corners of the chamber. Children's stories? A Morvex delegate named Steelmine stepped forward. You expect us to believe that the most advanced species in galactic history used their final act to preserve nursery rhymes? Yes. Then you're either lying or insane. Danny did not flinch. The Velnari achieved everything your species dreams of. Immortality, unlimited power, complete knowledge. And they discovered that none of it made them happy. So they left behind the only thing that did. The only thing that could. Lord Thess and slammed his fist against his podium. This is absurd. The tablets must contain technological secrets, hidden codes within the stories. You simply lack the intelligence to find them. With respect, Lord Thess-san, I found the one thing your scientists couldn't find in 40,000 years. Maybe that means something. The chamber erupted into argument. Species accused each other of plotting to keep the tablets' secrets for themselves. Others demanded that Danny be arrested and his mind scanned for hidden information. Through it all, Sorenka sat quietly in the observer section. She had submitted her formal report supporting Danny's translations. It had cost her every bit of political capital she had built in 200 years. Whisper of Dawn, the Cylon representative, raised her voice above the chaos. Her species was old enough that the others still listened. I have verified the humans' translations. They are accurate. The tablets contain no hidden technology. Then they are worthless. Lord Thess shouted. Are they? Whisper of Dawn drifted toward the center of the chamber. My species has not wept in 10,000 years. We had forgotten how. 2 days ago, I heard a bedtime story about a creature who wanted to befriend a star. And I remembered. The chamber went quiet. The Velnari were wiser than any of us, she continued. They understood something we have all forgotten. Power without joy is a prison. Knowledge without wonder is a burden. They looked at the galaxy and saw species racing toward the same empty victory they had achieved. So they left us a gift. Not a weapon, not a tool. A reminder of what truly matters. Lord Thessen's face twisted with contempt. The Kethrani Empire has no use for children's stories. We deal in power. Then you will end up exactly where the Velnari did. Powerful, immortal, and completely alone. The vote was called. One by one, the species of the consortium made their choice. The result was overwhelming. By a margin of 412 to 88, the council voted to seal the archive permanently. All translations would be classified. No further research would be permitted. Danny felt the decision like a physical blow. Lord Thesson smiled coldly. The tablets are clearly dangerous. They have already contaminated several delegates with emotional instability. For the safety of the consortium, they must be contained. Danny knew the truth. They weren't afraid of contamination. They were afraid of change. Afraid that their empires built on logic and power and cold efficiency might have to make room for something softer. Two security officers approached him. Mr. Webb, you are to be escorted from the chamber. Your archive access has been revoked. Danny nodded slowly. He had expected this. But as he turned to leave, he passed by the Morvex delegation. A young delegate, barely more than a student, stood at the edge of the group. Danny had noticed him earlier, listening with unusual attention. On impulse, Danny slipped something into the young Morvex's hand. A folded piece of paper from his notebook. The delegate looked down, then back up at Danny with confusion in his logical eyes. Danny leaned close and whispered, It's the story about the creature who wanted to befriend Star. Read it when you're alone. And if it makes you feel something, pass it on. Then he walked away. Sorenka met him at the chamber exit. All 7 of her eyes were wet with tears she had not known she could produce. I am sorry, she said. I thought they would listen. Danny shook his head. Some of them did. That young Morvex, the Cylon, a few others. That's how it starts. How it starts. Danny looked back at the chamber, where the most powerful beings in the galaxy were celebrating their victory over a collection of bedtime stories. Revolution, he said. The quiet kind. The kind that happens one story at a time. Sorenka did not understand. But 50 years later, she would. 50 years passed like water through open fingers. The archive of silence remained sealed, guarded by warships from 12 different empires. The official record stated that the tablets were dangerous artifacts containing memetic hazards. Unauthorized access was punishable by death, but paper is very hard to kill. On Morvex Prime, the logical heart of an emotionless empire, young Morvex gathered in basements and backrooms. They called themselves the Wondering. They passed around worn copies of stories that had been copied by hand 1,000 times. Stories about creatures who befriended stars. Stories about lies that grew too heavy to carry. Stories that made them feel things their species had forgotten how to feel. In the Kethrani Empire, the most effective diplomats were no longer the ones trained in intimidation and power. They were the ones who had secretly read the forbidden texts. They could understand what other species wanted because they had learned to feel what other species felt. Sornka, now 400 years old and near the end of her long life, had become something unexpected, a storyteller. She traveled from world to world, telling the tales she had heard Danny translate all those years ago. She was arrested 17 times, exiled from 9 systems, and still she kept telling stories that on a small space station at the edge of known space, far from the reach of any empire, an old man ran a school. Danny Webb was 78 now. His hair had gone white, and his hands sometimes shook when he held a book. But his eyes were still bright, and his smile was still the same one that had echoed through the archive half a century ago. His classroom was unlike any other in the galaxy. Children of 20 different species sat together on the floor, listening as Danny read from a paper book. On the walls hung drawings made by students over the years. Most of them showed the same thing, a small creature looking up at a star. And so the creature waved at the star every night, Danny read. Even when the other creatures laughed at him. Even when they said he was foolish. Because the creature knew something the others had forgotten. A young Morvex raised her hand. What did he know, teacher? Danny smiled. That the universe is full of wonders. And the biggest wonder of all is that sometimes if you believe hard enough, the wonders believe back. The door to the classroom opened. A tall figure entered, followed by several others. They wore no uniforms, carried no weapons, but something about them made every student go silent. They glowed. Soft golden light poured from forms that were almost humanoid, but not quite. They moved like music made solid, like joy given shape. Danny set down his book and stood slowly. His old bones creaked, but his voice was steady. You came. The lead figure spoke, and its voice was like hearing laughter from very far away. We have been watching for a long time, waiting to see if anyone would understand. The Velnari, Danny said. It was not a question. What remains of us? What moved on? The figure drifted closer. We left our gift 40,000 years ago. In all that time, no one understood it. They saw power where we left love. They sought weapons where we left wisdom. Until you, another figure said, you read our children's stories to your children. You taught beings who had forgotten how to wonder. You kept alive the only thing we ever truly cared about. Danny felt tears on his weathered cheeks. I just read the stories. That's all I ever did. That was everything. The lead figure reached out and touched Danny's face with fingers made of light. That was the whole point. The classroom had gone completely still. The students watched with wide eyes as beings from legend spoke with their teacher. What happens now? Danny asked. Now we invite you to see what we found. Beyond this universe, there is something beautiful, something that can only be reached by those who remember how to feel small and amazed and full of hope. The figure gestured toward the stars visible through the classroom window. You have earned the right to join us. Danny looked at his students. 20 faces from 20 species, all watching him. Thank you, he said to the Velnari. But I think I'll stay a little longer. These stories need telling, and I'm not done yet. The figures of light seemed to smile, though they had no mouths. We expected nothing less. When you are ready, the door will be open. It will always be open for those who remember. They faded like morning mist, leaving only warmth behind. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the young Morvex raised her hand again. Teacher, can you finish the story now? About the creature and the star. Danny Webb, former children's librarian, first human to enter the archive of silence, sat back down among his students. Of course, he said. Where was I? The creature was waving at the star. Danny opened his worn book to the last page. His hands were steady now. Ah, yes. So the creature waved at the star every night for 100 nights. And then, on the 101st night, something magical happened. What happened? The children asked together. Danny smiled the same smile he had smiled 50 years ago, when he first understood what the Velnari had left behind. The star winked back. Outside the classroom window, far above the small station at the edge of known space, a single star flickered with golden light. Almost like a wink. Almost like a promise. And somewhere, in basements and back rooms across 100 worlds, beings who had forgotten how to feel were reading stories about creatures who befriended stars. The revolution had only just begun.